Hi guys, hello. So I'm Kumar. I'm here to actually discuss about my blog, which is LBA, that is Load Balancing Advisory, mandatory for scan listener in Oracle RAC. Because I'll be speaking about Oracle 11G R2, that is the reason I'm stressing on the scan listener. But instead, if you go to the earlier versions of the Oracle databases as well, there is something called Load Balancing Advisory, that is since 10G R2. So that is the reason, and one more point that I wanted to make it clear before we go ahead is the version that I'm using is 11.203, where we have the scan listener that running, and what is that we are trying to actually gain from this blog is to understand what is the role of load balancing advisory and what are the types of load balancings that we have and which one is more suitable for us, and then how do we control this load balancing advisory, are there any options to do it. That is the main intention behind this blog, and that is what we are going to see going forward. The benefits, or the problems, or the possibilities to control this load balancing advisory, that's what we are going to see. And I'm sure that we understand how important is load balancing advisory, because distributing the load across all the instances in the rack is very, very important, and it has to be very intelligent as well. It is not like a round robin algorithm where first connection goes to the first instance, second connection goes to the second one, third connection goes to the third one, etc., etc. If you do that, basically you're not using the resources, you're not routing the connection based on the resource consumption on the instance. That is the reason load balancing is very, very important, and it is very accurate only when it is intelligent enough. So now we are going to see how intelligent enough is our load balancing options available on the Oracle database instance, and how is load balancing advisory is helping to do that job accurately. So what we will do is, first of all, let us see the concepts of load balancing with the help of the document and with the help of the blog that I have on the top that you can see in my website, that is OrSkl.com, on the same name. And I wanted to just give you a glimpse of what is load balancing. First of all, what are the different types and what is that we use. So coming to the load balancing, so let me open the document and show you there. So as you see on the screen, there are typically two types of load balancing, that is connection load balancing and runtime load balancing. And in turn, this connection load balancing is divided into two types. One is client side and then server side. Because the name is given as connection load balancing, that means only when the connection tries to reach the network layer of the Oracle software, that is either TNS or the listener, only then the load balancing decision will be taken. That is the reason it is named as connection load balancing. And when you ask about runtime load balancing, definitely it is something which happens and the decision happens prior coming to this network layer of the Oracle software. That means runtime load balancing is something which happens on the client side as well as server side. That means statistics which are gathered by the load balancing advisory on the server side are recursively, or for a certain time period, they are pushed into the application server to the connection pool, and your application, before it tries to reach the network layer of the Oracle software, it should be able to identify which instance has got less performance load, or you can say less load on an instance, so that it can go and route the connections to that instance through the network layer of the Oracle. And please remember, it will happen with the help of the ONS service. And because this is a feature where application should also support and it should be compatible with, you cannot expect that this feature works on all the applications. Basically, application should be intelligent enough to understand the ONS events or the notifications received on the client server. So this is very important and it is very good. And the main role for RTL, that is runtime load balancing advisory, is with the help of LBA. Without LBA pushing the notifications to the client server about the performance statistics of all the instances, your application server will not be able to take the decision before the connection request has been raised. So that is how it works. That is how LBA with the help of PMON collects the details, pushes to the client, and then client decides it. Now you must be in a very good position to understand out of all these options available in load balancing, definitely runtime load balancing is more preferred, and the next preferable load balancing is the server side load balancing. So now in this blog, what is that we are trying to do is, let us see how can we control this load balancing advisory for either server side load balancing or runtime load balancing. So we will do a case study here wherein we will be basically taking a 2-node rack environment, and then we are going to add a default service and then try to check what are the load balancing options enabled on this server. So before that, let me connect to my system where is a 2-node rack environment, and let me show you the status of that system and how is it configured, etc. And then we quickly start this case study. And as you see on the screen, I have connected to the first node of my 2-node rack environment, and then I am trying to now check the status of my clusterware. So I would just say resource-t, and it is clearly saying that there is a 2-node rack environment, and as you see on the screen, I have 3 listeners running, one on rack 1, I mean 2 on rack 1 and 1 on rack 2. That's fine. Now let me check the background processes, and I will tell you something interesting again. You can see the instance name is not just rackdb1, it is rackdb_1. I'm not sure if you have already have an experience on policy managed databases over administrator managed databases, which is the feature right from 11gr2. I have my Oracle RAC instances as policy managed databases. That is the reason instance name has been rackdb_1. If it is administrator managed rack environment, the name would be rackdb1. Okay. Keeping that aside, now let me create the service for this particular instance as I have in my blog. Then we will go ahead with the concepts of LBA then. So what I would do is I'll quickly copy it instead of typing it so that it would be faster. So as you see, I'm trying to add a service now, and here, so the service has been added with the name LBA SRV1, and for the database environment the name rackdb. So now let us start it. As you see, and yes, I'm starting the service, and then let us check the configuration of it. And as soon as we check the configuration, that is where we have to start understanding this balancing concept. So let me see this. When I see this, okay, there is a typo. Yes, and then this one. That's fine. Now, as you see here, there is by default connection load balancing enabled, and the goal is long. That means I'm not going detailed into connection load balancing goals and all, but there are 2 load balancing goals, long and short. What is long, what is short, I'll leave it to you to go and study that. But yes, there is a connection load balancing enabled by default when we basically created a service without specifying any, what type of load balancing it has to use. I have used -g rack pool because, as I said, the rack database which I have at the moment is policy managed database, not administrator managed database. Okay, and because it is, I gave it to default, there is a uniform cardinality. Sorry, that means it will make sure that service is available on any of the instance for sure. Now, yes, you can see connection load balancing is enabled, but runtime load balancing has been disabled. Now you can say that runtime load balancing is not mandatory for a service. Please keep this point in the mind, and then let us go ahead. So does it mean actually, because there is no runtime load balancing, does it actually mean that there is no load balancing advisory at all used by the scan listener whenever connection request reaches that service name? Okay, keep this question in mind, and then we will get an answer by the end of this blog. Alright, now let us edit this particular service to enable runtime load balancing. Okay, so I'll say instead of config, I should just say modify and then service, and it can be either throughput or service time. So I have clearly given in the blog what is the definition of service time and throughput. These are the only 2 options that you can have for the runtime load balancing. And now if you check the config of this, you can clearly see it's a service time, is the runtime load balancing, and it is enabled. And similarly, you can also config and modify this to throughput, and then see. And please remember, here connection load balancing is still long. And check this, and you can verify that throughput has been enabled, and then connection load balancing is long. People, you must be heard, I mean, you must have seen that, most of the DBAs would say that always runtime load balancing has to be enabled when the connection load balancing is set to short. That means it is not that software will not allow you. As you see, software is allowing us to do even when connection load balancing is long. But the reason behind that statement is when you have a connection load balancing long, and then if you are trying to have this runtime load balancing, it will work in a way that it will consider that each and every session that connects to the database should complete the service or should complete the session, only then the second session comes into the picture. That is the reason statistics will not be accurate on the client side. So that is the reason you should always have this load balancing as short. Only then your application server keeps receiving the LBA events as a notifications, and then it can be more intelligent enough. Okay. Having said this, now let us see that if we can disable this connection load balancing. Let us see that. Now, according to me, the disabling connection load balancing is something that means that disabling load balancing advisor. Why? Because I have seen an Oracle documentation that you must have clicked on the hyperlink that I have given in the blog. It says that clearly whenever you enable connection load balancing on the server side, it uses load balancing advisory for sure. That means if you are disabling connection load balancing, that means you are disabling what? Load balancing advisory. Is that true? Let us see that. But I will try to disable the connection load balancing advisory, and as I said, load balancing advisory, disabling a load balancing advisory is nothing but setting the goal parameter to none. That is what the Oracle document has given if you have opened the Oracle document. So I will be trying to disable that goal to none. I will be setting that goal to none and see if load balancing is disabled or not. So it is RAC db_1, and I would just say SQL plus /assist_dba, and then I'll run the PLSQL block. Let me run that. So as you see in the document, this is what he says: modify the service and set the goal to none. When you set this goal to none, that means you are disabling load balancing advisory. This is what the clear statement in the blog or in the Oracle document that you can find. Now let me check the status of this goal, and it is here. Set the goal as none. That means yes, you can think according to the document that load balancing advisory is disabled. But is that true? Let me actually go back and see the configuration of this service, whether this runtime load balancing is disabled or not. Because setting up the goal to none basically disables runtime load balancing. Let me actually check that with the help of config. But I don't see any difference. It is still throughput. But inside the SQL prompt it is showing it as none, but outside the SQL prompt it is still showing it as throughput. Is that true? Let me actually stop it and then start it back to see what is this. Why is the difference? Now after starting it, let me actually connect back to the SQL prompt and check what does SQL prompt say if the goal has been none or not. It is throughput. That means if you do any changes to the service names from the SQL prompt, it is not updated in the OCR file. You can say it is a bug because Oracle software doesn't allow any changes to the OCR file through the SQL prompt. It should be only through SRV serial. So that is the reason. Let me come back and then modify. I'll modify service and let me set this goal to none from the SQL prompt itself. So yeah, I should say -b and then none. Okay, and yes, there is a typo here. Excuse me for that. And then yes. Now, according to the document, what did it say? Setting this to none will disable load balancing advisory, isn't it? But still, if you observe carefully, config service, only runtime load balancing has been disabled, but connection load balancing is still there and it is long. And I have given you the second Oracle documentation where it clearly says that for a server side connection load balancing, definitely load balancing advisory is required. But here in the first document, it was saying that if you set this to none, load balancing advisory will be disabled. Is it not confusing? Definitely it is. But let me actually verify this, whether load balancing is happening or not. after we disable this load balancing advisory, for that I will be running up a command line prompt on the application server and see if the connections are distributed among the instances. So for that I would just go to the command prompt and I would start 3 command prompts so that connections are established, and I would drag it here, I would drag it here. Okay, let me enable these connections now. So I have this already. So I'll be marking up this one. Yeah, this is the connection. All right, and now paste it here, and then here. All right, let me check. Yes, connection established. Let me check. Yes, connection established. Let me check. Yes, connection established. Now after that, let me check from the instance to whether the load balancing has happened or not. Inst underscore id comma username from gv$session, where username which I used is system. All right. So now I think there is no load balancing. So let me actually check what is this service. Okay, I'm sorry. This is the VIP IP address, not scan IP address. So I have to come back and I should say it to be 6, not this one. Okay, that's fine. And then again exit from here and then change this IP to 6 because I have to use scan IP, and only then load balancing is done, not through the VIP. So again the next one, yes, here change it to 6. So now I have 3 connections from load balancing. I mean this one. Now you can see that there is a load balancing. That means there is a load balancing happening through the scan list now. And definitely, how come it able to identify and distribute the connections without load balancing advisory? Definitely it has to use the load balancing advisory details, isn't it? This is why I say that load balancing advisory is mandatory for scan listener. But the Oracle document says, one of the Oracle documents, sorry, that if you set this goal to none, definitely that means load balancing advisory is disabled. But I don't see that load balancing advisory is disabled. You can see that it is definitely performing this load balancing. That is the reason what I did was, in the blog, if you have seen, I have basically checked the events also. The events are not generated whenever you connected from this. So let me actually show you if the events are generated with the help of a query. Now as you see here at the end, you see that timestamp is not today's. It is not when you connected. See here, it was 4 minutes back. 4 minutes back we did not connect. It was only 30 seconds back. This 4 minutes back, because you have these events when you have enabled runtime load balancing. But when you disable runtime load balancing, there are no load balancing advisory events. So I wanted to stress here what Oracle wants to convey, hopefully, that if you set the goal to none, it is not that load balancing advisory is disabled completely. It is that load balancing advisory events for the Oracle notification service has been disabled. Hope this is clear. This is what I tried to make it clear. How is load balancing advisory and what is that Oracle tried to communicate? This is what I have understood with whatever exercises I have performed so far. Thank you guys. Thank you for watching my video. Hope if you like it, please subscribe to our channel and keep in touch with us with interesting videos like this on Oracle Database Administration. Thank you. Bye.